Good evening, and welcome to another empowering episode of the Slave Food Conversation, where two African American physicians, Dr. Columbus Batiste, cardiologist, and Dr. Eric Walsh, emergency room physician and doctorate of public health, explore the role of racism as a unique form of stress and the weaponization of food in the creation of health disparities in the African American communities, irrespective of income. They discovered that eating a whole food plant based diet in urban communities is not only possible, but is the key to eliminating health disparities. Today, our guest is Chef G.W. Chu. Growing up in rural Southern Maryland to a family devoted to carnivorous, our founder, Chef Chu, experienced the tragedy of losing close relatives due to a diet related disease such as diabetes, cancer, and other illnesses linked to poor diet and overconsumption of animal meat products. In 2001, at the age of 18, he made the decision to go vegan in pursuit of a healthier lifestyle, but found that many plant based foods at the time were less than palatable. With a relentless passion, Chef Chu sought to understand why our bodies crave meat. And over the course of nearly 15 years, experimenting with literally thousands of ingredients and cooking techniques, he found the secret to the most authentic plant-based versions of his favorite ethnic and comfort foods. Better Chu was born. As always, the Slave Food team thanks you for your support. We have reached over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, but please continue to spread the word about the Slave Food Project and subscribe to your YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button. Thank you for joining the show tonight. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you, Danette. Chef Chu, it's been a long time coming, sir. How you doing?
Hey, man, it's an honor to be in the room with, guests on the online with you guys, man. There's two guys that I really admire and I really look up to, man. So I'm really humbled to be here today.
Man,
we're very happy to have you on. We were looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's food and manifest with you right there. So, I mean, you gotta tell me what's the background of the name Chu. I mean, that's
interesting. I mean,
ever right there.
I mean, crazy enough, you guys talk about slave food. So literally, the name came through slavery. It was a Caucasian family's name. I learned it came from England. And I was funny enough. I was actually adopted at birth into a black family that had the last name Chu. And so again, but during the etymology of my father's family and just the history of my father's family's name, it came from a white family and it passed down to blacks. You might remember on Apollo, most of us used to watch the Apollo back in the day. The band was called Ray Chu and the Crew. And so that's a family member of ours. So yeah, man. Yeah. So
remember that.
Oh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. Well, it's a perfect name for you. It's befitting.
Yes. It's like I said, I was adopted into a family that had this name, man. So I always say I was born with the purpose, born with the mission, born to change lives one two at a time.
I love it.
Yes, sir.
So did you always cook? I mean, just being like, man, there's nothing to eat. I'm gonna go ahead and make my own vegan meat. I mean, how do you get to that point? I mean,
man,
that's a big leap right there.
Yeah, that's a big leap, man. So when I grew up, man, I grew up in the South, pretty much the top of the South in Maryland. We say Maryland, not Maryland, but Maryland. And I was a country boy, about an hour from Washington, D.C. My father's family, heavy meat eaters. My father was the kind of guy that, I'm not exaggerating, he shot squirrels out the window. Like, that's how country my father was. You see a squirrel climbing up a tree, he getting the shotgun, fitting to shooting the squirrel, and he gonna skin that squirrel. It's gonna be hanging in the garage, and that's gonna be in the freezer for some meat. You know what I mean? So, and I was 10 years from eating possum. You talk about slave food, I missed possum by 10 years. So muskrat, all that type of stuff is a part of our culture where I'm from. I was in a place where seafood, blue crab, and heavy meat eating, fried chicken, ribs, pork chops, ham, bacon, scrapple, spam, sausage, all that was a part of my lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, my mother's side of the family happened to be Seventh-day Adventist, and so I got exposed to vegetarianism as a kid as well. So I kind of got this crazy experience where I would go to my cousins who ate vegetarian And they had this, these fake meats. I didn't know what they was. Tasted like dog food, in my opinion, at the time. And I got exposed to vegetarianism. So growing up in my childhood, food, I like to say food was my happiest memories was built around food. Most of us, when we think about how we grew up, the barbecues, the hanging out, the cookouts, everybody's having a great time. So a lot of my family memories, my dad, we used to go fishing together. All that was like built around food. And so sadly, again, food also became a weapon against us because sadly, that food that we ate, the heavy amounts of meat, not a lot of vegetables, just eating good soul food or slave food, as you guys are saying, it had a detriment impact on my family itself. So that began, my eyes began to open as I got a little into my teens, my late teens, going to my early 20s, and I began to make that transition. But I learned flavor though. Growing up, I always say, man, if you can take chitlins and make chitlins taste good, I said that's creativity. That's creativity. You like you said, that you look at chitlins. I mean, anybody try to eat pig intestines. We ate hog head cheese, all that type of stuff. We grew up, but I'm like, if you could take chitlins and make that stuff taste good, that takes a far amount of creativity to do that. That was out of survival. And I said, if we can make chitlins taste good, you better believe we can make some greens taste good. You know what I'm saying? And so that was the mindset that I kind of said is that flavor, that creativity, but let's flip it on something healthy, something plant-based, something vegan. And that's how I started, man. And literally when I was 18, 19 years old back in 2001 when I became a vegan, man.
Okay. That's all right.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So I mean, how's your dad's side of the family? How they've taken to like the Better Chew products?
I mean, it's crazy because when I first got into plant-based, and I come for Thanksgiving dinner, I was a joke of the family. Everybody's laughing at me. I got my little small. It's Thanksgiving. They got the turkey, the ham, the fried chicken, and all that. I'm coming with my little veggie meat, my little fake turkey. And they like, man, you missing out, all of that. But as the years went on, sadly, man, we lost almost about out of 11 aunts and uncles on my father's side, it's only like 2 or 3 left, and most of them died from as late 40s to early 60s. Over a 12-15 year period, I lost almost 60-70% of my uncles and aunts during that time frame. And so, it's just all from lifestyle diseases that could have been prevented. And it was just devastating, man, to see people that you love. It ravaged my family. Well, our cousins, kind of broke that relationship that we had because aunts and uncles wasn't around as much. We didn't get together like we used to. So it had a big impact on my family, man. So, but crazy enough, my cousins, as they saw my product development, as I got my product in the grocery stores, they all call me and like I'm an order, and they get the products and they support, man. So it's a blessing because they lost their moms and dads just like I did, man. And so that was the thing that my family really they became more aware of why this is so important.
I want to ask you to just step back for a second because I think we're jumping into discussing your products, but maybe you should just start by telling the viewers, what you do and how you got there. I know you had in Oakland, California, a restaurant. I don't know. You may still have the restaurant. I don't know, but tell it. So talk about that. Talk about the products, so we can set the framework. Because I want to go back and talk a bit about how you connect this spiritually, because you're also a man of the cloth as well.
Absolutely, man. Well, look. So when I was 19, man, I had learned about this again, plant-based living and vegetarianism, and much of that was inspired by the Seven Adventists, this faith perspective. But again, when I first started eating vegetarian food, it was, honestly, again, I had something called these Franks, these hot dogs out of the can. It tasted like dog food to me, man. And so I really started saying to myself, man, how can I experience the chicken that I grew up on? I started missing that fried chicken, man. I started thinking about that fried chicken. And I started going into the kitchen, started developing recipes. And that passion of this wanting to experience what I grew up on turned into a hobby. It turned into this my passion. Every day I'm thinking about recipes and experimentation and so forth. And literally over a 5 or 7 year period, man, I literally developed my own proprietary techniques and recipes where I'm literally taking, everything from non-GMO organic soybeans to garbanzo beans to brown rice. And it's a lot of science, actually. So we created literally a process where we go from a bean all the way to a meat texture.
Dude,
And
no, wait a minute, Chef. Wait, I need to ask you because this is incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
so were you culinary trained?
I was not culinary trained, man. That was a crazy thing, man. I was in business. I was going to Howard University in business school. I had a passion for entrepreneurship. And I ended up crazy, I don't recommend this, but I was a crazy knucklehead. I actually quit college to become an entrepreneur. So I kind of got one of those Bill Gates type stories, man. But I quit college, became an entrepreneur, got into trades. I wanted to learn, how to work with my hands. And so I actually started my first landscaping business. And that's how I supported myself. And I was also selling books and canvassing, man, and selling health books door to door, man. But while I was doing that, I was cooking. And that was like my hobby and my passion. And honestly, man, I just literally disciplined myself, man. I took not hundreds, but like tons of cookbooks and did hundreds of recipes and just started studying cookbooks. I mean, this as a faithful student, just like you guys got your doctorate degree, I was literally studying food, man. Just looking at relationships between ingredients and textures and how different foods reacted and how, fats reacted and this protein, this bean. And I just started just being a student. And like over 5 years, I can say, man, the Holy Spirit, I always give him the credit, man. Just taught me some techniques that today, man, I mean, it's turned into a technology that we've developed our whole business off of, man. Wow. And God is really tremendously blessed off of this thing, man.
Yeah, you clearly are blessed and highly favored. I mean, it reminds me of one of my heroes is Vivian Thomas. You ever seen the movie Something the Lord Made?
Yes.
And had no training whatsoever, but God gifted him with the talent so he could go in and really reconstruct the heart.
Yep, I remember that.
So,
yes.
I mean, that's almost like you. I mean, no culinary training. You just dropped in the kitchen and started like creating.
Hey, and that was it, man. And like my hero is George Washington Carver, man. I got the same initials, man. Wow. So that's my hero, man. And I got GWC, man. Their first name is GW. So I always say George Washington Carver was, he took the peanut. Guy always say, if you guys, I had soybeans, man. I took soybeans and made plant-based meat. So, he took peanuts and made all the different things that we use today, man. So that's how we do it, man. So, yeah.
Very impressive. One of the things I like that you said is that you actually studied food.
Yes.
You took 5 years and you went deep into understanding food and how fats would react under certain circumstances. Because one of the things I like about the products you make is that it's all plant-based. Overall relatively simple, in terms of ingredients. And so it's actually it's very tasty. We were at I forget what conference we were at, and I you actually had me taste it, and I was like, wow, it actually tastes better than a lot of stuff, that people are eating from vegan meat substitutes. So I was actually quite impressed.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, man. Absolutely.
Well, that's the crazy part. When I was looking up stuff about you, I realized that you had gotten an award for your fried chicken, didn't you?
Absolutely, man. We got voted by one of the leading plant-based magazines as one of the number one vegan fried chicken right now in the space based on their taste test that they did, man. So like I said, looks like chicken, tastes like chicken, but guess what? It ain't chicken, man. Crispy on the outside, white in the middle. But one thing I will say, man, we really took time to really focus on our macronutrients. We got our sodium levels right. So we're literally like 20% daily value on our sodium, about 23% on our daily fat value. We also, one of the things we did right now, we're transitioning to 100% organic product as well. So literally in the next year, our ingredient deck is going to be 100% organic in its ingredients. And our mission as a company, like we like to say, is to democratize access. And so we want to create one of the most healthiest, it's not going to be do fried chicken. So, it's not perfectly, it is, we're trying to transition as a transition food. But we want to make it as healthy as possible and accessible to communities that need it the most. And that was one of the things that we looked at, how we operate in this business model, man, how we kind of creating this product.
Well, I'm going to tell you, man, you sound, stuff I've listened to kind of checking you out, you sound like you have your master's in public health. I know Dr. Wall has a doctorate in public health, but you start breaking down statistics, start breaking down epidemiology on the meat consumption within our communities and the food deserts, food swamps, food apartheid.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, I love your thirst for learning. Yes. That's what that tells me is you have a thirst for learning on the spiritual realm, on the practical realm to really impact your community. And so, I mean, tell me about that development. You know what I mean? Because people might wonder about that.
You know, one thing I realized, man, when you started looking at this, you know, food deserts or food swamps, as they call it, you know, places where there's not pretty much within 1 mile radius from there where they live, there's no access to healthy food options. So when I started peeling the onion and looking at this whole situation and saying, why do especially minority communities, not only do we have the highest rates of disease, and you guys know the statistics, you know, highest rates of diabetes, high rates of heart disease, high rates of cancer, all preventable disease, the least amount of access to healthcare. We also have the least amount of access to healthy food options. And so when you look at maps across the country, when you start looking at heat maps on, you know, obesity, diabetes, and you also compare that to places where there are food deserts, those maps are almost identical. And they're found largely in places where, you know, there's African Americans and minority groups. You also find that in those same communities that, you know, again, I saw that, you know, African Americans, there was a study by the USDA that did a study on the consumption of meat. And we found that Blacks consume more pork, more chicken, more turkey. Hispanics consume more beef. And so you started seeing that minority communities are consuming more meat. So again, as I looked at plant-based foods, I was saying that, listen, you know, who needs plant-based foods the most, especially is Black people and minority communities, because we have the highest rates of disease, the least amount of access. And obviously, you know, when it comes to plant-based foods, it's almost non-existent, you know, when it comes to options. I mean, it's starting to become a phenomenon with vegan restaurants popping up in city communities, but having places like Whole Foods and some of these other grocery stores, which I sell to, we need more of those stores in those communities. And I'm advocating that these stores start looking at communities of color as a place to put their stores and places to really start building up to provide health. And so that became a mission of mine. And lastly, what I realized, what you find is that I looked at it from a perspective of we don't have Black food producers. So when you look at manufacturing and people that are putting food on the table, most of the manufacturing or products you see on the shelf that you're purchasing is not made from people that look like you and I. And so, you know, that's a science and a skill set that we don't have. And so we need opportunity, man, where, you know, we have to learn how to do these processes, learn how to manufacture, learn how to have these opportunities to grow even further and grow deeper into our business models. And so that's what we're doing, man. We're manufacturing and learning how to do some stuff that's amazing, man.
And let me jump in here and just say this. I think when you say that when you go into a grocery store and you see all these prepackaged and processed foods that are all over the grocery store, they're not made by us. And I think most important is I would differentiate one thing you said. It's not that they're not made for us. It's not that they're not made to better us. These foods are made to addict us, to get us to buy and buy and buy and buy. And one of our first guests on this show, we quote him all the time, Columbus. He said the business of business is business. I mean, he's like, listen, the bottom line is he was like defending the food industry because he's a food chemist. And he was saying, you know, don't think that they're doing this to you on purpose. They're just trying to make money. And I think the difference is when we have our own products, you're not going to put out a product and make the salt content be 60%.
Yes, exactly.
Because you in good conscience, he's like, nah, I can't do that to people who already probably consume too much salt, who have.
Can you hold 1 second, Dr. Walsh? I got some emergency that just happened. Could you hold on 1 second? I'm so sorry. Could you hold on 1 second?
Yeah,
no
worries.
Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry.
While he does that, though, I mean, you know, Eric, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's amazing when you look at his evolution, because you're talking about someone who basically was not culinary trained, who not only develops a product, but also manufactures a product,
right,
and gets into manufacturing and then distribution, that now is distributing on a major level.
He's in like 100 Whole Food stores or something, he said.
Whole Food stores. And, you know, in my other world, in terms of practice, we always talk about the 4 pillars: access, service, quality, and affordability, right? Those are the 4 pillars in terms of deliverance of care. And so that access and providing access inside of communities of color, providing high quality foods, providing it in an affordable fashion, and then on top of it, that the service attached to it, that's huge. That's huge. You're on mute, Chef.
Forgive me for that. And exactly what you just said, man. I think that's the key, man. Like, people need access. And that's one of the things that we saw that was so critical And again, I went to a convention one time, but I'm not going to name the grocery store, but I literally was like, out of like, it was like, not exaggerated, it was about 1,000 producers at this event. And it was probably no less than, out of that 1,000 producers, maybe 10 people that looked like me in that room.
Mm.
And what I said to myself was that in order for us to really bring health to our communities, when you go to a food desert, like, you know, I'm in Oakland in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, there's a street called International Boulevard. You go 10 miles, all you see is liquor stores, you know, the little you know, chicken shack, fish fry shack, you know, all the little corner stores. And most of the stores, number one, they're not owned by us, number one. You know, most of those stores, you got a bunch of fast food restaurants that are obviously in those communities, lined up and down the streets. So we don't own the grocery stores. We don't own the food manufacturing in those communities. And I feel like not only do you need doctors like yourselves educating in those communities, but you need business owners and manufacturers and producers that care about the people that's going to bring healthy food to uplift their communities. And that became another level where we just saw a big need and a big opportunity, you know, where now people that's actually trying to help bring healthy food to the communities look like the people that's actually in those communities, you know? So yeah, man.
That's incredible. What was the journey like getting into Whole Foods, and you know, as an African American male and bursting on the scene and with a whole new product out there? What was that like for you? Tell us about the behind.
Man, it was a journey, man. I mean, I say a 15-year journey. I started in the restaurant industry first. So my first vegan restaurant started in 2008. And so I literally started my educational experience really started as a chef. And I started my first restaurant in 2008 in Maryland, in my hometown where I grew up at. In a little country town, I brought a plant-based vegan restaurant. They thought it was crazy, man. I'm literally bringing a meat potato town. I got chicken that looked like chicken, Philly cheese steaks is all vegan, man. The folks was like, man, this dude lost his mind. But I started there in the restaurant industry. Had another restaurant in Arkansas, believe it or not. And then I eventually ended up in 2017, 18. I met somebody from Whole Foods that was at a convention. And I just literally, man, came up to him and was like, man, I got the best vegan fried chicken you ever gonna taste. And he was like, man, come to my office, let me taste it. And literally, man, I found myself at the headquarters, the regional headquarters for Whole Foods in Northern California. A guy named Patrick Wyman. And the crazy story, man, he got the product. He was like, look, I'm gonna give you the whole region. I love the product. We don't got people that look like you in Whole Foods. I'm gonna make this happen. A lot of you not. He made it happen. It was a big thing going to 50 stores, and we ain't never gone to stores before. He was like, man, we're going to give you 50 stores. I was like, man, it's impossible for us to do 50 stores. Give me like 5 stores. You know what I mean? And my faith wasn't there, but God saw fit, man. He made it happen. A lot of you not. This week, he's at Whole Foods, Austin, Texas, at the national headquarters. He's sharing my product this week with the national headquarters team to get us nationwide in Whole Foods. That's what God did on that thing, man. And so again, this being faithful in that was his least, starting in a restaurant, building over like literally a 10-year period. I mean, God opened doors, man, for us to get products in places like Whole Foods and beyond, man.
Love it. That's incredible. What a story. What a story. That's a blessing, man. That's incredible. I love it.
Man.
That's powerful. Because I mean, you know what? I mean, I think that's an example. I mean, right now we're coming out of 2020. And what's interesting is that, you know, Eric and I, we started on this journey together in developing the Slave Food platform specifically to provide education around, what was it, Eric, around 2016? I think we started working on this and started really hitting and giving lectures and doing stuff prior to that. And then all of a sudden, COVID, George Floyd, all of this stuff happened. And so all of this contention arose. And one of the things that came out of it was this initiative, this awareness from companies and manufacturers to shine light on the fact that we need to kind of open the doors and this 15%. So have you seen any doors open or things that have happened since all of this has transpired?
Well, you know, honestly, immediately when George Floyd hit, man, there was the whole issue, the whole concept of DIE, diversity, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, that became, in all industries. I'm sure in healthcare, to manufacturing, to this whatever space that people are in the corporate world, it became a big emphasis on, you know, that issue, you know, hiring a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist to consult your company or bring somebody on full time. So a lot of the grocery stores began implementing programs where they really wanted to seek out, again, Black, brown manufacturers to be on their shelves. So there's definitely been improvement and advancement. I will say it was a hype time, when that was really kind of the, I won't call it a fad, but there was a lot of funding was definitely put in place. There was a lot of COVID rapid response funding programs, low interest loans, that a lot of us did benefit from during that time frame, outside of the government programs that were there. So there was a lot of emphasis. I mean, we got to meet with Target and different places over that time frame. A lot of stores began to have initiatives to say we're going to bring X amount of percentage of Black owned products on our shelves, and that's still happening and still going. But it's not an easy thing because you just can't start producing 4,000 stores overnight. You know what I mean? And so there has to be levels of education and even support to bring companies to be able to do that. And so that's where the conversation is really kind of starting to go. Like, why aren't Black companies on shelves? What's happening? Why aren't they getting funded? Why when you go to certain these conventions, you only see a lot of times white males that's running the industry, and that's really kind of common in the food industry. So those are the questions and conversations that are happening. It is not just happening by Black people. I mean, you have a lot of Caucasian people that's bringing this to the forefront. You have other nationalities that's really having this conversation, and a lot of advancement is happening, but it's still a lot more to do.
It's important. It's important. One of the things I say, and then I'd love to hear a little bit more holistic. Eric kind of brought up about your background in terms of the spiritual realm and training and so forth in religion. But one thing I want to say, just kind of transitioning out of that real briefly, is it struck me the other day when I was on a conference call about social determinants of health. And one of the things that people a lot of times they'll say, man, you're all, there's this conversation about color and about burden and disease. And it struck me just, as a physician, one of the things I first do is I assess a person's symptoms when they're coming in, what's wrong with them. But what do I turn to immediately after I hear their story? I want to know about their past medical history. I want to know about their past surgical history. I want to know about their family history. Why? Because it shapes the picture of the environment and surrounding and the risk factors that are going to project towards the future and the risk towards their offspring. So when we look at social determinants of health and we see that there are disparities that are happening inside of certain communities, it's so important to understand the entanglements, right? Not the entanglements that's been out in the news, but this entanglement as it relates to where a person lives, works, plays, and prays, right?
No comment, man. No comment.
No, we're not commenting on that one. I just had to stop that. I wanted to make that was clear. But but the thing is the fact that there's so much is intertwined from transportation and what's gone in that divided communities.
Yeah.
Segued and the pollution that was subsequently enacted, the lack of walkways, the lack of crosswalks, the lack of street lights that lead to increased just tragedies. And on top of the lack of access, so all these things play a role. So when you speak to aspects in the business realm about the struggles and the lack of resources, that's real. That's historical. Very real. And it's important to address those issues.
I mean, even further, when I talk about food deserts, from a racism perspective, a lot of it's infrastructural, institutional racism. When you think even back on redlining, for example, where obviously groups of, where, Blacks were pretty much put in the ghettos. When that happened at the same time was that, those places didn't get good insurance rates. There wasn't a lot of economic development in those parts of the city. And so, grocery stores and businesses are not going on that side of town to create their new businesses. So, and then also the SBA and some of those government loans wasn't supporting businesses in those areas. And that was historical, like during the 80s and the 90s and so forth. Crack cocaine hit us. He was kind of left to just pretty much die. I know Dr. Walsh did a lot of work at HIV. I remember reading about that. And so, you saw these cities, man, just being ravished, with disease and addictions and so forth. And like you said, from a business standpoint, all the way from literally I always say the New Deal wasn't a New Deal for us. After World War II, we didn't get the stimulus checks. They call us getting handouts, which is not a handout. They got handouts. They got great loans. They got economic development that gave them opportunities to be able to purchase buildings and get, where that 60, 70 years ago, that wealth has been building since then, not including since the time when slavery started and all that stuff started happening as well. So when you look at all of the issues when it comes to access in our communities and not having grocery stores and healthy food options. I mean, it goes even deeper into the redlining and institutional racism and its economic development in these communities. It's so connected, and we need change, man. We need change and hope.
Yeah, but I mean, bravo to you, because you're a part of the change. You're part of the resiliency. So with teaching classes, with providing the product at a more affordable rate, with, like Eric mentioned. So I went and I looked, right? I checked out like some of the products just to kind of make sure and see. I got one right here, right? I got it right here.
I love it. I love
And
it.
I checked out in terms of the ingredients, and I'm gonna tell y'all, man, this stuff, it looks good.
I love it, man.
Right?
On.
And so,
Come on, man.
I mean, that's part of the stuff.
It.
When I look at it as a physician, I look at the ingredients, of course, first ingredient being soybean and so forth. That tells me where your intention is.
Yeah.
And so bravo to you. Bravo.
Hey, man, we appreciate that. You got the bag, man. I appreciate that, man. I love it.
Come on now.
I love it.
Work.
I love it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I wanted to, I do want us to go a little bit into the spiritual journey and that part of it. I like, that you say it's a transition food. I think, as you look at it, there are people who do need a transition. They need to be, bridge foods. But I mean, there's always going to be stuff like Super Bowl parties and weddings and other things. There's a role for these foods as part of an overall very healthy diet. And so the problem, of course, is if you compare, if you substituted your products for the diet that most of our ancestors and definitely most of our direct family members ate, they would have lived a lot longer. There's a lot of carcinogens, things that produce TMAOs. We go on and on. Just the iron in an animal, just the iron in the blood of an animal. That's why the scripture says you are not to eat the blood of an animal.
Come on.
People think that you can, if you just make it farm fed, farm fed, and it ranges around out on the fields, it'll be healthy. But inherent to meat are things that are not conducive to the best health. In fact, are disease forming.
Yes.
So I think we always have to remind people of that too, because one of the things that's about to happen is you're going to get a backlash. I'm reading a book now, Apocalypse Never. It's a very interesting book because it's a book that goes like the guy basically is saying they got the environmental movement wrong. What's fascinating is there's a whole section against the move towards a whole food plant-based diet.
Oh, wow.
And of course, he fights it on the realm that this isn't really good for the environment. And he makes his argument. But what's fascinating is he also makes an argument that it's not as healthy as they're trying to make it out to be either. You're going to see the meat, dairy industries now begin to push back. And they're going to target products like yours.
Absolutely.
They're going to come after products like yours and say, listen, this is worse than meat. You might as well eat meat if you're going to eat this. And that's where they're going to go, even though the science doesn't support that. So,
absolutely.
It's I want to make sure people understand. I mean, if you're someone who eats meat 3 times a day and you wind up eating your product once a day, you've made a pendulum swing in the right direction.
Absolutely. And that's a powerful point you're making. I think you're absolutely right, man. Like I remember, it's a sad but like this interesting. It's my father. My father passed away, but it was an interesting experience I had with my dad. My dad literally has a month to live, and he literally looked at me and said, look, I went home to spend some time with him, before he passed away. He looked at me and said, son, take me to Popeyes. So I was like, all right, Dad, let's go to Popeyes. And the reality was, at that point, I wasn't going to sit here and talk about no vegetarian chicken at that time with my pops. It was just, it is what it is. He's stage 4 cancer. It is what it is. But I said it to say, like you said, man, like if my dad would have started that 8-9 years ago, 10 years ago, before when I first started speaking to him, what kind of impact would that have made? Because that's what he was eating. He was going to, KFC and Popeyes, 2-3 times a week. And that was life. And like you said, you can replace some of these products and it makes it'll make a massive difference in people's lives, man. That is the goal. That is the goal. Yeah.
It is. And it's complicated. It's complicated when you're dealing with family. You touched on it earlier in terms of, the Thanksgiving. You touched on it again with your own dad. And I think any of us who are inside this thing of this wellness and lifestyle movement, we understand that you have to approach people with love and respect. Yeah. And part of that love and respect means you're going to respect their decision.
Absolutely.
sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
And I think our responsibility is to convey the information about what's important.
Mhm.
About, listen, this is an avenue in which you can make a change, you can make a difference. And I think it's problematic if we don't, but it's also problematic if we're so dogmatic. And
Yes.
we
Oh,
do
man.
it with the standpoint in which
Yeah.
we're just like, listen, this is it, and you have to do it, and it's either
Yeah.
you do this or I'm not going to love you.
Yeah.
That's problematic.
That's problematic. Absolutely. And I think as you guys asked, about my spiritual journey, man, that was really, I learned a lot from a spiritual perspective. And I thought about, this, I look at Jesus, for example. I've been in ministry and preaching the word and so forth, man. But in the scripture, man, I love the story of Christ, man. So not only was Christ a carpenter, but Christ was a chef. You know what I mean? So I always like to look at the examples, man. In the desert, man, it was a food desert. There was no food available. And Jesus said, man, let me get the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And I said, man, I know somebody in that audience has some hot sauce in their purse. I said, I know they did. When they brought that fish out, they made that fish and had a nice little fish sandwich, however they ate it, man. But Jesus had the miracle juice bar, had the juice bar right in the beginning. But I started seeing, man, that food was very close to the heart of God. And food was really a place of connections. It's a part. It's culture. It makes up who we are. And and food for me, man, became a conduit of conversation. Because again, I could provide access, but access without education still doesn't make a big difference. People can have access, but if their mindset is still the same, they won't actually transition. And so it became also for me, and like you said, and how you educate makes a big difference.
Yes.
When I first came vegan, I mean, you kind of, I went on my horse, and then you gotta change. You beating everybody on top of the head, and I quickly learned. My mother put me in check, man. I came back home for like about 6-8 months, and I'm on this health kick. I'm in my mid-20s, and my mother, she didn't eat any pork, but she still ate meat. I had the audacity. My mother's buying the food. I took all of the stuff that I thought was unhealthy out of her refrigerator and put it into a bag and put it into the bottom shelf. And my mother, man, boy, she came home. She looked at her refrigerator, and I called myself putting some healthy stuff inside of her refrigerator. Man, she gave me that look, boy. If you don't put my stuff back, I was about to get the smack. And I learned. I mean, that experience, man, taught me such a powerful lesson in life that you can't force people to change. It comes with love. It comes with education. It comes with letting them taste and see that the Lord is good. And blessed is the man that trusted in him. And so with me, it's like the food got to taste good, man.
Yes.
You can't preach health and preach go vegan and plant-based and the stuff tastes like cardboard. It's rubbery and it doesn't have a good texture and flavor. It doesn't look the greatest. And again, that became really, man, that spiritual, the gospel has to look good. You got to present it properly. You got to present it in a way where it's attractive. You can't just fear people to change. And I think a lot of times, both in the spiritual realm as well as in the health world, it can be done out of fear and judgment, from a judgmental perspective, and it doesn't bring about sustaining change. And that really what I've kind of come to believe, man, it has to be done in a way that's, encouraging, encouraging people to change and providing solutions along the way.
And one of the beautiful things about Christianity is the concept of righteousness by faith. And what I've learned in my own health journey is that really, even in this, it's righteousness by faith. A lot of people want to prove to you they're healthy. So, that's why they become almost pharisaical in their health in presenting the health message or trying to get you to get healthier. So they want to show it to you. But when I study it and you study the scripture, eating right and being healthy is connected with a clarity of mind.
Yes.
It is the ability to better connect to God.
Absolutely.
And so it doesn't necessarily, may not always show on the outside, and you may not always, but it's supposed to give you a clarity of mind. The scripture says, "Blessed are you when your prince, blessed is the land when the princes eat for strength and not for drunkenness."
Yes, absolutely.
You can eat for drunkenness, which is why the scripture then says, "Be sober, be vigilant." Over and over it says, "Be sober, watch unto prayer, be sober." Why? Because how we eat manifests our ability to make smart, wise, spiritual decisions and not be, as Jesus says in Matthew 24:3, don't be deceived. The Greek word for deceive there is the word planeo. Wow. Don't be led away. So one of the reasons I bring all of that up is your ministry is now extended into the shelves of Whole Foods.
Mm.
It is a deeper, what you're doing is deeper than just selling a product, because many, as this book I'm reading says, much of the people who are vegan, they're not vegan to have a closer connection to God.
Hello.
In fact, I don't even like the word vegan. The more I study, the less I like the term vegan. I like whole food, plant-based. They're doing it to save the environment. They're doing it to save the animals.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're doing it because they make a connection between it and being able to fully connect to God.
Yeah.
So what you're on there's a mission to it. There's an eternal purpose to it. And one of the reasons why all of those listening to this, we really need to keep you in prayer.
Yeah.
You're going to get into rooms with people of influence.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able to, they're going to ask you who you are. You're going to be able to say you're a man of the cloth. You're going to be able to tell them how Jesus had the first miracle juice bar. And all of that is going to open doors. God, so it's bigger than the product. It's bigger than even the health message.
Absolutely.
It's about the one who gives health in the beginning, and that is Jesus.
Absolutely, man. And I've seen that manifested, man. I mean, I literally had a rapper named T-Pain came to my factory, man.
All right.
And T-Pain was eating some chicken, man. We had a little barbecue in the back. He literally called E40, and while I was there, man, it was funny. Right, my factory's in Vallejo, man. It was funny, man. And so, to your point, man, I mean, I've been able to meet people. I mean, mostly in the industries, the founder of Beyond and Impossible, and there's people that this in very, very, very amazing places. I'm on the board right now of the Plant-Based Food Association, so I'm on the board with the CEO of Tofurkey, for example. And so so I get get to rub shoulders with some really amazing people in the food industry. Mayoko's Creamery is another famous company in the plant-based food space. She's a good friend of mine, and so, like you said, man, your work opens doors, and I've seen, I mean, God just do miraculous things in this work that I'm doing. And to your point, man, this is since it is, I do come at it from a mission, a spiritual mission. And when you understand when your work is a spiritual mission, there's also a real enemy that's going to do everything he can to stop it, man. And I tell you, just the things that we at times go through, just from a business standpoint. Not only I'm already black, so it's all business, and a black male at that. And I'm not saying the black sisters don't have a hard time either, but this being black in America doing any kind of business, you already just got people that look at you like, when I say, hey, I created a technology that I can literally take soybeans through a preparatory process and transform it into a horizontal substrate of plant protein. They look at me like, yeah, right, okay. It's like it's always like a doubt first, like, what is he really kind of can figure this out, and so forth. And then so it's you get a lot of bias just by how you look. And then on top of that, then you got the real devil. That's like, man, if this young man gets a hold of this thing and gets some real capital and really builds his business, the good that by God's grace, I would do, if as we build and grow, God only knows, man. And so it is a war, but like I said, man, God is when we won some battles, we've had some setbacks, but we've seen the movements of God, man, and what we've been doing. And I give him all the credit and all the glory.
Amen.
That's right.
So I don't know, Cubs, if you don't have it, I want to have a follow-up to that. What's next, man? So you are blowing up, you're in all these Whole Foods. Sounds like you're gonna wind up in Whole Foods across the country, which is good because I only live about 10 minutes from one. What's next? What's the next iteration of all of this?
Well, I'm going deeper, man. One thing that we realized, so we got our manufacturing business. So right now we're getting our manufacturing on a solid basis, and God has been phenomenally working on that. So we're in the process of purchasing 2 buildings. We're literally solidifying our manufacturing, getting a whole bunch of equipment where we can produce a lot of product. But the purpose of that, again, going back to the mission, we wanted to create kind of like almost like a hub and spoke model where we literally have a manufacturing, which is like the hub, and we got a spoke system, which is like restaurants. So we're literally in a process of creating our own restaurant chain. That's literally the model. And the purpose of the restaurant models are to be educational centers for our communities. And so, again, I come from the faith perspective as a Seventh-day Adventist. And there was a person that wrote about restaurants over 100 years ago about how powerful these they call them centers of influence. And so that was the vision over 100 years ago, that was spoken about how a restaurant could be a center of influence. And I've experienced it. I've done 3 restaurants that over the last 10 years. I've seen the miracles literally. So we look at our restaurants as being a place where we can have education. I can work with you all and do a slave food project, and we can have a therapeutic diet that's actually not only just a lifestyle challenge, but we're doing blood work before and blood work afterwards. So we're doing literally a Daniel type diet, and we can literally have real data and real science backing up a plant-based lifestyle. On top of that, providing education, creating community, being able to see that behind this, the purpose behind all of that is God's love that's fueling this whole thing. And so right now, man, that's the dream, that's the vision. We got a manufacturing business that's going to now allow us to produce products that we can distribute anywhere within the country. And that's important because a lot of restaurants don't succeed. They don't last long. And a lot of that becomes because of the business structure. Imagine if Impossible Foods had their own restaurants. And the reason why that's so powerful is that they control their manufacturing. And so when the manufacturer can also sell their own products to the customer, the business becomes more sustainable, if that makes sense. And because the cost is a lot lower. And so we're building it from a sustainable business, and then with a deep mission to really get into the communities through these restaurants and really be living centers of health, of wellness and health in these communities. And that's the vision, man. And really be living centers of health, of wellness and health in these communities. And that's the vision, man.
I'm hearing it play back, man. That was so nice. It's coming back twice on the broadcast here. But listen, I'm gonna tell you, I feel everything you're saying. I think that's incredible. That's incredible. I'm not sure whose sound that is, but that's incredible because one of the things I've seen is that people, they can understand the why, but they need to understand the how. They need to taste. They need to see a sermon, not just hear a sermon. And so I think by showing and demonstrating it, as far as in action, in terms of cooking, preparing the foods, and providing education, that's where the quality. I mean, when you had stepped out, one of the things Dr. Walsh and I were talking about was about the pillars. So when I was in administration, we talked about access, service, quality, and affordability. And you're hitting the pillars, right? You're providing access there. You're providing quality foods. You're providing service of education and service to the community, which is important, of the greatest need. You know, I always kind of joke and I'll say, you know, I chose interventional cardiologist and I chose to practice where I practice because there's the greatest need. There's a sickness of the sick patients where I'm at right now. And that's why we choose to focus on communities of color, communities with despair. It's not that the message isn't for everyone. It's because those are in tremendous need right now.
Yeah. Amen. That's awesome.
Love it.
Fantastic. Well, I got some questions for you so we can see if we can run through these in the short amount of time that we have left. So one of the questions is, you did mention that you attended an HBCU, you went to Howard University. Yeah. So what would you say to someone who is attending university right now, who is looking to do a similar path as yours? Like, what would you do differently, or would you do anything differently to get you to where you are right now?
I was in B school, and I ended up going into entrepreneurship. But the good thing right now, there's a lot of awareness at B schools for entrepreneurship. They're encouraging more entrepreneurship. When I was in school, a lot of the B schools is mostly about going into corporate America and working for the man and just making sure that all But I think there's a lot of awareness, and there's a generation of young people that want to be entrepreneurs, and so I think there's an excitement around entrepreneurship, and also they have a lot of cohorts and fellowships for university students that they can be a part of while being in university. So there's a lot of programs out there that is actually focusing on food access and food deserts and just really looking at food holistically, and even from an entrepreneurship perspective and manufacturing and food. So I think there's a path to get a foundation. We need food scientists. Yeah. I wish if I went over again, I would have, wasn't a food scientist. I learned kind of on my own, and there's some holes and gaps that I don't understand because I didn't get that, professional training. But I mean, imagine if we had, especially in our HBCUs, food scientists and people that was really focusing on those type of aspects of food and so forth. So, we need it. And I think the schools and education can be a great platform for this.
Okay.
I just want to add to that, because it was actually Brian Hardy who brought this to our attention, that Howard University, actually in a survey from Bloomberg Business Week, has the highest share of company founders.
Wow. Entrepreneurs.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
All right, next question, because I'm on a mission here to get through
Come on.
this now. There, Shonda's Real Food and Drinks wanted to say, can you come to Houston, Texas? Um, and do you ship? Do you ship to other locations?
Absolutely. So we have Eat Better Chew, which I think is up on the screen a few times. You can actually we ship nationwide. We do sell our products to various restaurants throughout the country, so we can actually do a wholesale model for restaurants. And we travel. I'm doing a program in South Carolina in a couple of weeks where I'm doing a cooking program for a church and for a community. So definitely get our contact information. We can definitely talk about coming to Houston and sharing some love with them.
You got it. Question number 3. Are your products at Whole Foods in New York City?
Not yet. We're not in Whole Foods in New York City. But right now, again, eatbetterchew.com. They can get it shipped to their doorstep.
All right. Question number 4. Can you direct Whole Foods to place your products to areas where there is a high Black, vegan, vegetarian population? And I'm feeling like Huntsville, Alabama is what they're talking about.
That's the only place in America.
This might be me, but
you know, I've spoken with Whole Foods a number of times about the importance of this looking at communities of color, and I think the conversation is there. I think there's it's going to take a lot for that to happen, but that conversation, I mean, we've talked to like people that's in power that's actually looking at, sometimes they have smaller like models that they can put in some of these locations. So there's thoughts about it, but it's just a question for businesses, it's sustainability and numbers and stuff like that a lot of times. So yeah.
And I think it's important to just mention that something that Chef Chu keeps saying, and that is these products can be shipped. So some of our excuses have actually dwindled a little bit in that product. Now, that's probably a little different when it comes to fresh greens and fresh fruits and vegetables, which is what's most important. But there are co-ops you can do at farms locally to get some of that stuff brought to you as well. So you do have to think outside of even the grocery store box sometimes.
That's true.
Absolutely.
One thing too as well that I would suggest to folks is that there's the power of the pen. There's the power, business of business is business and money. And so if you voice your concerns through petition and say, hey, listen, I'm in New York, we want better foods. We want better chew, right? We want hit it up. Hey, connect with Plantega, connect with Whole Foods. Let's get this product here. Enough people do it. That's when change begins to happen.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Bernadette Session mentioned that Oakland's Vegan Mob restaurant uses your food. So is your food in other restaurants that you
absolutely. Tell Miss Bernadette I said hello, Miss Bernadette, but she's a wonderful used to be a customer. But yeah, Vegan Mob, we actually sell. They got voted the #1 vegan restaurant by Veg News. Just got a shout out with them. We actually supply in America. Yep, in America.
Wow.
And we actually supply a lot of their meats. So they feature the #1 meats come from us. And so we actually we work hand in hand with the owner and a really big part of this story. So so that's it. That's what it's all about. Yep.
Are there other restaurants that you're doing the same thing with, or are you open to those kind of relationships?
Yeah, we're definitely we're expanding that. So we do have other small restaurants that get it. It's another restaurant well known in Atlanta called First Batch Artisan. Which is another amazing chef, Chef Didi. She uses our products, but we have other small restaurants that uses our products as well. Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. Sounds good. I'm looking around to make sure that I didn't leave anybody out in terms of the questions, but we really definitely like the fact that, you're really in places where a lot of us aren't. So it was very encouraging to hear that you're on those boards so our voices can be heard.
Yes.
But what would you consider is the process, for someone who is looking to get their products in similar situations that you're in?
One thing I realized, firstly, I mean, be faithful where you are, #1. Sometimes, I mean, that's #1. Be faithful where you are. But going beyond that, like a place like Whole Foods, for example, Whole Foods has a program called the Local Forager Program. So anybody that's a foodie that's in the foods, Whole Foods has a local forager program. They're actively looking for minority businesses because there's very few. So there's a local forager in every region of Whole Foods that you can tap into. And then lastly, as Dr. Walsh mentioned, there's co-ops. There's a lot of co-op grocery stores, and they don't really have a lot of hoops. You can go to that co-op and say, hey, I want to get my product on shelf. And they support a lot of small producers to get on their shelves.
Okay.
So that's another easy way to start out and get the product on a shelf and get that experience and education to get everything off the ground.
Absolutely. In Columbus, we went to a co-op in Georgia, right? Down at Little 5 Points. I can't think of the name of that one. But that was, you know, kind of in the heart of, right. All right. Well, it was great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Yeah. You know, this has been, I mean, every session that I get a chance to kind of get on and we talk with the guests is always good. But this, in my mind, is one of the more exceptional ones. And the reason why is because I think you married all the things that we try and bring out from the spiritual aspect, the health aspect, but then actually the honest truth is the solution. First, when we talk about the solution, oftentimes we focus so much on the problem, focus on disparities, focus on deserts, focus on apartheid, focus on what we don't have, as opposed to like you and your company, a completely Black-owned company that's not only creating the product, manufacturing the product, distributing the product, and with the long-term goal to be impactful in the community, to enact change. That's what we love to hear. That's what we need to hear. Yeah. And so, you know, our prayers, our thoughts go forward with you continually, because as Eric mentioned, you know, I believe that your mission is blessed from God, and we need to support you. We need to support you. So everyone out there who's listening needs to go and get some food. They need to get some better chew. Get some better chew, okay, and chew it up.
That's it. That's it. That's it, man. I love it. I love it. But that's the whole purpose, man. You couldn't explain it any better than I could, man, to say that it's all about bringing something better to the people, man. And you know, like I said, our business is by God, man, and He's blessed my talents, my gifts, but it takes a village. It's one thing I learned in business, and it takes a village. And everybody's got to do their part, man. And so, like, you guys are educating and bringing information, and also using your skills as doctors and public health. I mean, it takes all of us fighting to make our communities better, because it's not an easy work. It's very, very difficult. It's a lot of sickness. Sometimes it's overwhelming, but it takes warriors. And this is what this looks like, man. And we got to keep fighting for the good of our people, man.
Love it. Love it. Love it. E, any thoughts?
Listen, like I said, we've been waiting to do this a long time. We're very proud of you.
Thank you.
And you know, we're going to continue to pray for your success in what you're doing. And you know, we know, like you said, the enemy's going to come against, but no weapon is formed against us will prosper. Amen. So we just pray a blessing on you, and we will be supporting your product as well. I didn't realize I could order it online, so now I'm gonna go online and order it. So we praise God for you, and we again get our prayers.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much.
And this is not going to be the last time. So we will plan on looping Chef Chu into one of our events in the future. It's guaranteed, right? So if the audience, if you all out there, you appreciate Chef Chu, I want you to share this broadcast. I want you to go to his site, buy you up some of his product, and make sure everyone around you knows what's there, right? And so powerful stuff. But man, we love you, appreciate you, and look forward to the next time. And those of you out there who are tuning in, we appreciate you committing your time to us on this Friday evening. We look forward to connecting with you soon in the future. I believe our next show will be in the next several weeks, where we'll be talking about the power of a lot of things, of sleep and a bunch of other aspects there that can really change your life. So stay tuned. And Chef Chu, stay on. We're gonna get some information. We're gonna make sure we connect.
Absolutely.
All right. Sir. Take care.